Hey guys, I'm Tiffany,
I'm Stephanie,
and we're Sisters of the South,
South.
back with another video this week. Before we get started, we just want to remind everyone to please like this video and share if you deem it worth sharing. Also, please subscribe for more true crime content every week, which is absolutely
Free.
and hit that little notification bell so you will know anytime we drop a video. Also, we want to give a little shout out to our friends over at SoFly. SoFly. And I'm going to let Stephanie tell you about them.
They are a small family-owned business here in the Houston area, and they specialize in embroidery and laser work. They'll take accessories such as caps, beanies, hoodies, t-shirts, and they will put embroidery on it, whatever you would like, different colors. Also, with their laser work, they do keychains, and I also just saw a really neat thing they were doing, and it was a cutting board with some lettering on it and some design, and it was beautiful. So we would like to share their information with you. We'll put it in our description box. They also do our merchandise. And so get out there and order something special for your loved ones. The holidays are here, and I know that you'll be happy. So I'm excited for you to try them as well. And so from here, we're going to drop a little video just to kind of show you what they do. So here we go.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Please go check them out, let them know we sent you, and enjoy your merchandise. All right, and with all of that being said, Stephanie's going to take it over.
We are going to talk today about the Sodder Children Mystery from Fayetteville, West Virginia. In Fayette County, George and Janine Sodder gathered for a Christmas Eve celebration with 9 of their 10 children in 1945. But that holiday would end in heartbreak. On that Christmas Eve, Maurice and 4 of his siblings, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, asked to be allowed to stay up and play with their Christmas toys after the rest of the family went to bed. They promised they would do their chores before they went to sleep, so their parents agreed to let them stay up. Shortly after midnight, the children's mother, Jenny, was awakened by the ringing phone. When she answered, the female caller on the other end asked to speak to someone Jenny did not know, then laughed and hung up. Jenny believed this was a prank call. Before she went back to sleep, she noticed that her home's lights were on, the shades were up, and the doors were unlocked. Jenny was woken up again that night by a noise on the roof. At 1:30 a.m., she realized the house was on fire. She called for her husband and children to get out. 2 of the Sodder sons and their daughter, who was carrying the baby, made it outside, but Jenny and her husband George realized Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty were missing. George tried to find a ladder which was kept near the house so he could climb up to the children's bedrooms, but the ladder had disappeared. It was later found down an embankment away from the house. The Sodder house burned to the ground less than 45 minutes after the fire started. The fire department initially blamed the blaze on faulty wiring. Some reports stated that officials could not find any trace of the missing children's remains in the ashes, but others reports maintain that some bone fragments and possible human organs were located. One was analyzed and turned out to be beef liver. A coroner's jury ruled that the missing Sodder children had died in the fire. Afterwards, and against the advice of the fire marshal, George plowed over the remains of his home and planted flowers in memory of his lost children. Within months of their children's presumed death, George and Jenny decided they had not been killed by the flames but had been kidnapped, and the fire deliberately set to cover the crime. The house's telephone line had been cut sometime before or after the fire. Witnesses reported sightings of the Sodder children in the area shortly after they supposedly died. The Sodders attempted to get the case reopened, but for many years the police refused to investigate because they believed no crime had been committed. In 1949, George and some others excavated the site of his former home to search for the missing children's remains. Only 4 pieces of vertebrae and 2 small bones that were possibly from a child's hand were located. A pathologist who assisted with the search remarked that it was unusual that so little was found, as the fire was quick burning and should not have so completely destroyed the children's remains. The pathologist believed the bones that were located were from a 14 to 15-year-old, which would match Maurice's age. But due to the location that the bones were found on the floor plan of the house, George did not believe they were from his son. Another analysis conducted years later determined that the bones were from a 16 to 22-year-old person. Curiously, the bones did not have any signs of fire damage. It was suggested that they were planted at the site from a nearby cemetery, but there were no evidence to support this theory. In 1968, George and Jenny received a photograph in the mail of a young man in his mid-20s. On the back of the photograph were these words: Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. Little boys, A90132, or possibly A90135. The Sodders believed it was a photo of their son Louis as an adult. They were unable to verify their theory, however. The man in the photo remains unidentified, and it is unclear who sent the picture to the Sodders and why.
Wow, that's interesting.
It is interesting. And Jenny and George searched for their children for the rest of their lives, posting a billboard advertising a reward for their safe return. George died in 1969 and Jenny in 1989. Many people theorize that the missing children were killed in the fire and their parents were simply unable to accept the loss. But others believe the children were indeed abducted and were possibly taken to Italy. The youngest Sodder child, who was an infant at the time of the fire, is still trying to determine what really happened to her brothers and sisters. So, yeah, this is so heartbreaking that this family spent the rest of their lives wondering what happened to their children.
Well, yeah, because I don't believe they were in the fire.
No, because there's too many little nuances that occurred. The ladder that was typically in one spot
The
outside the
phone call,
house.
the
Yeah.
bones that just a few, but
Yeah.
weren't in the fire. Yeah, somebody put some thought into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the mother heard something on the roof. She was awakened, through the night and heard something on the roof. I mean, you could say, well, maybe it was a raccoon or a squirrel or something like that, but it was probably a thump, probably something very unusual that she wasn't used to hearing.
Well, yeah, okay, we had a roofer out,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a distinctive sound when
It is.
someone's on top of your roof.
Yeah. It's loud and
Mhm.
yeah, it's not an animal. And, as parents, we have instincts, like gut instincts that something's not right. And so I think that's what happened here. Um, I, I honestly, I don't think that they died in the fire.
Mhm.
It would just, it just seems like there's more to the story than that. It's possible, and I don't know, it's possible that maybe in the back of their head, they thought maybe a family member from Italy came to get them. I don't know. It's a
Yeah, why
possibility.
Italy?
I'm not positive. Maybe they had some family members from Italy or that lived in Italy.
Yeah, but you're talking coming over here in a time that you can't track someone that easily. Trick this family with a phone call, some bones,
Mm-hmm.
set their
Yeah,
house on fire, and kidnap their
and
children.
then they have to get them back over
Yeah,
to Italy. So,
without being seen
mhm.
anywhere.
Yeah, it's so strange. And then this picture shows up decades later, and gives them more to ponder and anguish over. It's just so sad. But I
Yeah.
personally think that something nefarious happened,
Oh, yeah.
and who knows? I mean, the kids could possibly have lived through it and just were adopted out or trafficked. I don't know. I mean, it's just the strangest thing. But yeah, guys, I don't know if you've heard of this story, but I'd like to know what you think about it. What do you think happened to the kids? Do you think they passed away in the fire? Or do you think someone came in and kidnapped them, um, and then, took them somewhere else or did something with them? What do you think? I can't imagine being the only one left after your parents pass. You're the only sibling left, and you're left years later still trying to find answers.
And it's just strange to me. How old were they again?
So Maurice was 14, Martha Lee Sodder was 12, Lewis was 10, Jenny Irene was 8, and Betty Dolly was 5.
Okay. So a few of those would remember enough to say, okay, I'm an adult now.
Mm-hmm.
Where are my parents?
Yeah, if they were still alive. You also think, and you hear the stories of someone who's been abducted, and they kind of assume the role
That is true.
that
Very
they're
true.
in their mind, and then they almost forget who they were prior to the abduction.
Very true.
And that sounds very strange. And sometimes, even in cases where they have the opportunity to run, or there's a police officer and they could get
They
some help,
don't.
they don't. They don't do it. So, there's so many options of what happened to these young children. I would venture along to say that they were abducted and they were no longer alive within a day or so. My opinion. If they had died in that fire, more than likely their bodies would have been recovered.
Yes.
Not bone fragments and not pieces of their body, because they said the fire did not get that hot.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's an inferno and it burns them like a cremation, where their bodies are just powder, their bones. I think that their bodies would have been recovered with damage, but they would have been able to recover them and figure out who they were, and their bodies weren't there. So that really doesn't make any sense. And let's be honest, if they're going back and digging and they find bone fragments, the likelihood of someone digging up bones from a cemetery and putting them there, to me, that sounds strange. It's a huge possibility that house was built on a cemetery that was hundreds of years old, and that's where those bones come from.
Strange,
I
because
don't
you'd
know.
have to put, again, a lot of thought into that.
Right. That's a lot of kids to put them in a car and abduct them. But I mean, it's happened. It could happen. So this, to me, it's the only thing that makes sense. And these parents felt that in their gut after months of thinking about it and going over and over and over again in their head. They just knew something wasn't right. And so I kind of venture into believing their thought process, even though people think it was because they were grieving. I mean,
I
they've
don't think
gone
so.
over that day in their head probably thousands of times. And every little thing that happened that day that was not normal stood out to them. And that was their conclusion. And I believe them. I
I do
believe
too.
what they're saying. So, but the sad part is, they received that one picture of a guy in his 20s, and they don't, like the story says, they don't know for sure if that's their son Lewis, but
Who would have mailed that to them,
yeah,
though?
who would have done that? Someone that knew them,
Mm-hmm.
knew where they lived, and knew what happened. And looking at the picture, they have no idea if that's their son. He's in his 20s now, you know. So, and it's not a very clear photo, but it could be anybody. It could be, people get weird, and they'll send letters and notes to a victim or a victim's family just to play head games with people, and that's probably what that was, which is completely horrifying and sad. But that's more than likely what it was, but they had to live with that and ponder that thought as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but guys, if you've heard about the story, we'd like to hear your thoughts on it, see what you think possibly happened. I tend to think that they were abducted, and I don't think that they lived past a couple of days after abduction. Have no idea why that would happen, but I tend to believe what the parents thought in their heart. I really do.
I don't know if I believe that part, though.
What's that?
I don't know. I have, to me, if you're going to go through that kind of trouble and you obviously know the family, they had to have known who took them.
Yeah.
Why go through all that trouble to kill them?
I don't know.
Maybe it was family.
Could have been.
I don't know. It's just odd to me.
Yeah, it didn't say if they had other family members that live close by, but I mean, if they have them, if they abducted them, I mean, their parents would have known,
Yeah,
right?
it wouldn't have been close by.
So it's just strange. There's 1,000 thoughts that you
Oh,
could
yeah.
think in that situation.
So let us know yours, guys.
Yeah, we want to know what you think. Yeah, it's a sad Christmas story, and I'm sure every year Christmas rolled around, these two parents had to go through that torture every
Yeah.
year on top of what had already happened. So it's really sad. But guys, let us know what you think. But until our next episode, we want you to see
See
the
the
good
good and
and
stay
stay
imperfectly
imperfectly perfect.
perfect. Bye,
Thank you.
guys.
Bye.